Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Ryan Haubrock. He's director of RPA Services, and Logan Lewis, chief operating officer at EnterBridge Technology. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for
Hey,
having
John.
us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to learn about EnterBridge. Why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and EnterBridge.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, John, I'm the COO of EnterBridge Technologies. EnterBridge has been around for about 20 years. It was originally founded as a software product company. So the original vision was to create a pricing product and basically sell SaaS 75% of the time and then do services the other 25% of the time. Well, what happened after the first couple of years is the founder realized that the services side was taking off and the product side not so much. So since then, we've evolved kind of into strictly a custom software development company. So we build custom software. We don't really sell prepackaged stuff. So it's really specific, unique problems for our clients. And one of the offerings that we have is robotic process automation, which we're going to talk about today. So that's a little bit about EnterBridge. We're a little bit different from your typical development shop in that we hire more business-minded tech talent, right? So we're not a tell us what to build and we'll build it for you type of group of people. We're a little bit more consultative in the way that we approach things. So, and prior to EnterBridge, I worked at Amazon for 5 years in operations and finance. And then before that, I did system implementation for Microsoft. So kind of a long history of technology and operation experience on my side.
Ryan, how about a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Ryan Haubrock. I've most of my career has actually been with EnterBridge. So I've worked at EnterBridge for about 11 years now and played a variety of roles, both on the business side and technical side across all of our divisions, really. The last 5 or so have been leading the RPA division. So we have 10 full-time RPA developers that I'm leading to build automations for a variety of customers and a variety of industries. So anyways, that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
I should have added on EnterBridge. You know, the reason we're on the Healthcare IT Today podcast is our RPA division is primarily focused in the healthcare space. So we serve a number of other customer segments, but in RPA we found a niche in healthcare, and we do a lot of work for healthcare clients. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, Logan, tell me about it. What has been this evolution of RPA? Seems like both of you have been in the space for quite a while and seen this evolution. And why should healthcare care about it?
Yeah, I think Ryan can provide some really great color on the evolution of RPA. But like to kind of kick it off, I think what we've seen is maybe a slow start 5 years ago, I would say, Ryan, right? So like it was new. Some of the big players in the space like UiPath and others were just kind of gaining some momentum and some visibility. And then since we started, it's really kind of exploded. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd add there, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about RPA at its core, what it's doing, you're essentially using software to automate digital processes. And so using that as a definition, RPA has kind of been around forever, as long as technology. But if you think about it more, I don't know, the way we look at it today, it's probably been around for about 10 years, but like Logan said, really taken off in the last 5 or so. And I'd say that we've kind of lived through that evolution because prior to kind of standardizing on an RPA platform, we were building automations for our customers using Python or other scripting languages. And then about 5 years ago, realized there's some platforms that are mature enough where we should start exploring those and seeing if there's a platform we can standardize on and kind of provide these automations and build these automations a little bit quicker and more efficiently and in a more standardized way. And so really, just as we started looking into UiPath as a platform, which is what we use, RPA really started taking off, and we've just seen exponential growth over the last 5 or so years. So,
and to your second point, John, like why should healthcare care about it, right? I think so. Healthcare has been one of the industries I think most served by RPA. So like all of the large automation companies kind of have some level of healthcare focus. You know, they may not be specific only to healthcare, but that it's definitely a huge subset of their business. And I was reading a recent study about kind of where healthcare is headed over the next 5 years. I think it was by McKinsey. And I think McKinsey's essentially forecasting that the healthcare industry as a whole, their EBITDA percentage is just going to decrease over the next 5 years, largely because of increasing costs, and their rates not increasing from the payers, not increasing at the same rate as those costs, right? And so in order for healthcare to be able to kind of fight these headwinds, I think that they're going to need, like, there needs to be investment in technology and find ways to get cost out through automation and technological investment. And interestingly, on that McKinsey study, the only sector in healthcare that they were predicting to grow from an EBITDA percentage, at least, over the next 5 years was the healthcare IT technology, right? Because there's going to be a shift in as you're trying to get cost out, to find ways to automate and use technology to do things that humans were doing previously. So I think it's really important right now, because coming out of COVID, obviously healthcare is facing all these challenges and headwinds to their profitability and their operating efficiency. And so this is just massively important to try and figure this stuff out now, so you don't get left behind.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about, because in the evolution of healthcare, we were behind on implementing a lot of the technologies. And I think it's kind of hard to implement an RPA when you're still on paper, because you don't know what the process is. It's not repeatable. It's hard to automate. And so, it's in some ways we almost had to implement the electronic medical record and all those other technologies to understand what processes we wanted to automate. So I think that's an interesting part of this evolution, as I hear you talking about it. The other one that, to your point, Logan, is that many organizations, before they were resistant to the automation because they're like, oh, this is my job. And now they're like, hey, I'm doing 3 people's job. Please automate. So there is this mindset shift that's happened that I'm sure you've seen as well. Ryan, are there ways that, RPA can benefit a healthcare organization? Maybe what are the top ways you're working with your healthcare customers?
Yeah, so the ways so claims is a big one. So really, if you look at anything where it's high volume of transactions or high turnover, lots of data entry, those are the main things. Then to your previous point there, talking about being on paper, I'm still blown away by how many companies, especially healthcare organizations, still use faxes and get faxed information all the time. And so we've seen a lot of use cases around faxes where they have incoming faxes, whether that's claims or other data that needs to be processed. And the great thing about RPA is there's a lot of tools that have really gotten a lot better over the past 3 or so years that allow us to kind of read and interpret those unstructured, scanned documents like a fax or a PDF, and then take action on that. And so anywhere where there's high volumes data, like I said, claims, we do a lot in claims processing, prior authorizations, claims denials. One example, we work with a healthcare customer and they have to submit thousands of claims into a third-party Medicaid portal. And there was, prior to us automating it, they had someone they'd get a spreadsheet of 1,000 claims, and they'd have to go into that portal and one by one enter those claims in, just one after another, repetitive rules-based process.
Yeah. And a precise process if a human's doing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So not so precise.
You take that, you automate it, you get rid of all the errors, all the bot can work 24/7. It's not going to make those mistakes, and it cranks through that spreadsheet in a matter of a couple hours as opposed to multiple days. And so you get all that efficiency where a human was having to do all that work before. So anything else to add there, Logan?
Yeah, I think the other piece of this, John, right, is we've been attending some of the healthcare conferences. I was just listening to your latest episode, kind of recapping some of those things. And one of the things that I've seen as a theme, other than increasing costs, is like massive labor shortages, right? Like that's a huge issue right now. And I think when people think of that, they think on the clinical side, right, with nurses, which is definitely a problem. But we're seeing with our clients on the revenue cycle side as well, right? Some of the people that they relied on to do revenue cycle activities can make the same amount of money at Chick-fil-A, right? And so the staffing problem is a massive issue. And so like Ryan's saying, if it's rule-based and repetitive, I mean, our clients know their business as well. They can figure out where those things are, right, where the pain point is, and then we can alleviate the need for people to to be hired into that role. They're usually high turnover roles. It's costly to keep them staffed. All those different things. I think that's another space that, like, this is what automation is for, and it's a huge problem now, and this is what it solves. So
yeah, I have good news for you too, Ryan. Faxes aren't going anywhere, so that's a topic for another day. But yeah, there's a reason why fax is so popular. I like to call it the most interoperable part of healthcare. So it's anyway. That's a topic for another day. Is that how you really look at this, Ryan? Maybe you could start, on the ROI type of thing. Is it about the efficiency? You talked about the precision, right? Logan talked about, it's hard to hire these staff, let alone nurses, the RCM staff, the front desk staff, et cetera. Is that kind of the ROI, or how do you talk about kind of the return of these RPA implementations?
Yeah, ROI is a huge focus for us when we're talking with any customer. Like, if you're not going to get ROI, RPA is going to die on the vine pretty quickly. And so we talk about it as soft and hard ROI. Hard ROI is how many hours can you save me? How much more money can I get? How much money can I save? all those kinds of things. And that's part of it. Hey, if you can process 1,000 claims in a couple hours, as opposed to paying someone a few days and having to retrain that person each time they turn over or whatever, there's money saved and hours that can be reallocated for that person to go do something of higher value. But then there's the soft ROI of, this person has to do this mundane task all day, every day. You're going to see high turnover there. You're going to see unhappy employees there. And so there's that just employee satisfaction piece. There's the reduced error rates, like you had mentioned before. There's a lot of soft ROI that comes with RPA as well. But avoiding constant hiring and retraining and going through that whole cycle, you lose a ton of efficiency just having to go through that retraining cycle. Once you build that automation, you never have to retrain it. You just run, and if you have to change a rule, that's one thing, but you're not ever having to just retrain the entire bot. And so there's a lot of efficiency gained on top of the just the hard hours and dollars saved. So,
and I would say the one other thing I would add, Ryan, would be sometimes it turns areas that were cost centers previously into something that generates revenue. So we have a client that we're working with right now. They get requests from their payers on all these suspect condition kind of requests, and so they have to go in and manually check all of the, like, patient record by record to see, okay, did they, were they diagnosed with this thing in the last year? That could take, so that takes a ton of time to do. But the interesting thing is, this payer will pay them an increased amount for every single suspect condition essentially survey that they complete. And so they were going from maybe generating $80,000 a year to, once we're done with this automation, going to be over $2.4 million a year in additional revenue. And so it's like a double whammy, right? They were kind of doing it already. They're spending time doing it. So now there's a person on the clinical side, by the way, that no longer has to do that. And it's turning into a revenue generating activity. So, I mean, the ROI can show up in just about any way you can imagine. So the ones that people forget about are the ones that Ryan mentioned, though, is the soft ROI. Like the value of a happy employee is really hard to quantify, but it makes a significant impact on an organization.
Yeah. Well, and we're quickly seeing that employees don't want to do the mundane tasks. So, like, once you give them an RPA and they're just doing the higher level work, who wants to go back from that? Right.
Right.
So good luck in
Exactly.
recruiting, et cetera. So that's interesting. Logan, what are some of the common objections that people give for RPA, and how do you kind of respond to those objections?
Yeah. So there's usually a handful, right? So, believe it or not, cost is not one that we hear very often, because if we pick the right process, then, the math makes sense, right? It's going to cost this much, but you don't have to do that forever, right?
Yeah.
You never have to do it again. So we don't hear cost a lot. The big barriers are usually like, do we have the processes defined, and do we have the mechanisms put in place to identify these processes and in a timely fashion, or especially in healthcare, oh, I don't have enough time to invest to try and do this
To
activity,
figure
right?
out the process.
Yeah, exactly. So
Uh,
we try and overcome that. Well, so one, like kind of like what I mentioned, we take more of a consultative approach. So we're not the you just tell us what to do bunch of software developers, right? So we try and guide people through that process and help act as that kind of process identification team member, right? So we help take that on. And then obviously from an implementation standpoint, once the process is identified, that's our bread and butter. We make our business model is all about services revenue, right? And so we're in the business of taking that off your plate so you don't have to worry about it and you can just reap the benefits. So so we really with our clients, they don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about this. We do all the thinking for them and keep them up to speed throughout the process through weekly project management check-ins, et cetera. Any others, Ryan, that I'm missing? But I remember those as our biggest objections.
Yeah, I think a couple more that come to mind is one that I always kind of laugh at is people like to say that their processes or their systems are special. Like, oh, I know you can automate all this other stuff, but not mine. Like my process, way too special. My system, way too special. And the reality of it is we have yet to run into a system that is too special to automate. So the way that the automation software works, it can interact with that system just like a human can. So as long as you can define those rules by which you interact with that system, we can replicate that and interact with whatever system that is, whether it's a homegrown desktop application or a web-based, widely used piece of software. So when it comes down to it, doesn't matter how special or complicated your process or system is, the reality of it is that there's a high likelihood, as long as, again, you can define those rules, it can be automated. And then the other one is just a general, it's too good to be true. There's no way that you can automate, like there's no way you can click through the buttons on this application. There's no way this bot can do what you say it can do. And so what we like to do with our customers is find something small that we can automate, some quick win, low hanging fruit. Let's knock this out, prove the value. And then we'll do like a show and tell with the broader group within their organization to say, here's what we did for person A, department A, whatever, and show it to them working. So they see it clicking buttons and sending emails and moving data from one place to another. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it could actually do all of this. And then the wheels get turning and inevitably, RPA kind of spreads throughout the organization. So those are two more that came to mind for me, at least.
I think it's a good thing to highlight, Ryan. Go back to your first thing is like RPA is system agnostic, right? So you need to interact with Epic, you need to interact with Cerner, you need to interact with some online portal. It doesn't matter what the system is, like it sits on top of that. And just like Ryan said, if a human can do it, then the robot can do it as well.
Yeah, there used to be a lot more barriers, I guess, to some systems, but those have kind of all been knocked down through enhancements and improvements to the RPA technology. So it really is like we have not run into a single application where it's been like, sorry, we can't do this because of the way this system is set up or anything like that. It's with OCR and computer vision and things like that. The sky's kind of the limit on what kinds of systems and processes you can automate.
Yeah, it seems like the other objection that I hear sometimes that is kind of related to what you just described was, like, is this going to be accurate enough, right? Is this going to make me look like a fool if it does something stupid as me, essentially, right? Is that going to make us look bad, if we file a claim the wrong way, or if we, whatever the automation, if I misguide the facts to the wrong inbox, what do you get, how do you address that?
Yeah, it's good. Go ahead, DM. Go ahead.
I'll take a first crack, and then Ryan, you can probably clean it up for me here. But I'd say the number one thing is we have a pretty robust like project management and software development lifecycle, and one piece of that lifecycle is user acceptance testing. And so we're not going to put something in production if people aren't willing to test it and test a fairly substantial sample size of that. Of the automation. And so usually through that process, all of the major issues are kind of worked out from there. So I think that's a big piece of it. The other piece that I think is really it's maybe a little bit unique to us, but if you have a good automation partner, it shouldn't be an issue, is we have like a standard framework that we build all our automations on top of. And that framework has some exception handling logic to it. So sometimes people view automation as an all or nothing type of endeavor, right? It's either zero automation or 100% automation. But what we actually find is most of the time, 80 to 90% of a process's activities are fairly standard. And then there's like that 10% edge case that can get kind of sticky. And so we'll just say, hey, let's handle the 80 or 90% and let's kick the 10% to an exception queue that it will still be worked by a person. It's going to take a fraction of the time as it used to take, but these are the ones that humans should be looking at. These are the ones that they should be spending time on. And then we get rid of all this stuff that doesn't really need to be focused on by a human. That's kind of what our approach currently. Ryan, anything you would add?
Yeah, the only other thing is kind of on the front end of the whole RPA process is the documentation piece. So we've gone into a couple of customers where it's like, we tried RPA, it's not working, we need your help. And the first thing we ask them is, can you show us the documentation on the process? We call it a PDD, a process definition document. And inevitably, in most of those cases where it failed, either there is no documentation or it's really poorly written or kind of incomplete. And so we pride ourselves on coming in and spending a fair portion of that kind of project lifecycle on the documentation piece. So we're going to talk with process owners and the people actually doing that process day in and day out and document that step by step, data point by data point, system by system, exactly what that process looks like. And then we hand that over to the customer and say, this is what we believe your process to be. This is how we've documented. And then we do some iterations back and forth where they say, oh, you missed this piece of logic, or we need to add this piece of logic, or there's also an if-then scenario that we need to do here. There's another exception there. And we go through multiple iterations of that and make sure that everyone has sign off and feels comfortable. And we kind of stack hands on that process definition document and say, this is what we're going to automate. And then everyone's comfortable going in that as long as we do it, what we said we were going to do in that document, that it's going to be a success. So we find that that documentation piece is critical to the rest of the project.
Yeah, no wonder that's the barrier, is doing the work to create the document, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's where the real work happens. Interesting. Obviously, in this world of automation and AI, everyone's talking ChatGPT. So I have to hear what you think about that. How do you see it playing out between solutions like RPA versus ChatGPT? Do you see them as kind of complementary? Are they competitive to each other? How are you approaching ChatGPT, or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so there is a lot of hype around ChatGPT and AI in general. I think because of all the conversations around ChatGPT, just AI as a whole has kind of been, that conversation has been restarted in a way.
Yeah.
And so I see most technologies like that as complementary to RPA platforms, we'll call them. Because if you think about we'll just use ChatGPT as the example, you prompt ChatGPT with some question, whatever that might be, and it's going to give you a response and answer its best guess based on that open AI. But it's not that once you have that data, how do you make it actionable? And that's kind of true across most systems. So it's not just ChatGPT, but think about any EMR or an email that you get or any kind of data out there. How do you make it actionable? And I think that's where RPA comes in. So again, using ChatGPT as an example, let's say you prompt it with a question of, is Alabama going to win the national championship in football this year? And it will give you back some response, maybe some statistics on what it thinks about Alabama winning the national championship. But then what do you do with that? Like, let's say I want to go place a bet or something like that. You could then take that data with RPA and go place that bet. And that's a silly example, but it makes that response from ChatGPT actionable. And so with an EMR system, if you have a claim in your EMR system that you need to get into that Medicaid portal that I was talking about earlier, how do you make that actionable? You don't need to replace your EMR system. You don't need to replace the portal, but you need to help them talk and make that data in both of them actionable. So that's where that RPA layer comes in. So you're getting that data from one place to another, you're processing that claim or doing whatever you need to do. It's that kind of actionable and interconnectivity between systems that RPA provides that a chat GPT doesn't. As powerful as it might be, it's only, I get that response from chat GPT, and then what? Like, I can go take some manual action if I want, but if I want to automate any of that, that's where that RPA layer comes in. So I see most of those technologies as complementary.
And I would just add, if I'm looking at maybe like where we would see it impacting healthcare the most, I think one of the areas would be like the patient experience, right? That's a place where you can use these ChatGPT type functionality, get a lot of information from your patients, and then seamlessly have it all integrated with all your different systems, right? And so I think, and then no longer are your patients waiting as much time in an office. Their information is up to date with their medical records, et cetera. All that stuff becomes a lot more seamless. So I think it's going to enhance the experience for the people being served. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely see how ChatGPT or related technologies could add to the RPA process, right? And most of them are built with that API in mind to be able to ask them the question. Ironically, if you ask them if Alabama's going to win, it will say it doesn't know the future and it won't actually answer the question. But we all know the answer is we hope not. So
That's right.
Sorry to all the Bama fans.
Yeah, no offense to the Alabama.
No, that's really interesting. But you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the two mesh together. And it's fascinating to think of RPA as the action behind what ChatGPT prompts, and that actually is an interesting example of the limitation of ChatGPT, because it doesn't do predictive analytics the way healthcare would like it to do, probably, or like it to evaluate. And so, what other technologies, and solutions are going to use the data and the process of ChatGPT to do predictive analytics for healthcare, where that is really important, but then it goes back to your question. Okay, once you have the data about the prediction, what are you going to do about it, right? So
exactly. Yeah, RPA is good for a lot of things, and it's very good at kind of being the glue, the interconnector, the go-between, if you will, between one system and another. Going back to your question of objections, another one that we hear is, I don't want to replace all my systems. Like a lot of people have bad taste in their mouth from big software implementations that take years to do and cost.
Epic's not hard to implement, is it, John?
No, I mean, I'd say that about any EHR. They're all easy, right? There's no transformation to their entire workflow and they don't live on it 80% of their life.
yeah, exactly.
Is that the sarcasm font on a podcast? Is that?
It's going to
loud
solve
and clear
problems. It's not going to introduce any new problems, all those things. And so it's like, that's not where RPA lives. We're not trying to replace your systems. We're taking your existing processes, your existing systems, and just improving kind of, again, their ability to talk to each other and interact with each other and complete those processes within those existing systems.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, Logan, I think you gave us a good view into some of what's possible with RPA, and something every organization I see is looking at and saying, where should we be doing this? So I appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and perspectives. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.